What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actresses sits down for what should be a routine late-night interview, only to find herself facing questions that cross every professional line imaginable? What you're about to hear is the complete breakdown of what was supposed to be a simple promotional appearance that turned into television history, for all the wrong reasons. This isn't just about a celebrity losing their cool. This is about respect, boundaries, and what happens when a host decides to push too far. Make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story gets more intense with every single exchange. Viola Davis walked onto the late-night set that evening with the same grace and professionalism she brings to every red carpet and interview. She was there to promote her latest project, a powerful drama that had been generating serious awards buzz. The audience gave her the warm reception she deserved, applauding as she settled into the guest chair with that characteristic smile that has charmed audiences for decades. Everything seemed perfectly normal as the cameras rolled, and the host began with what appeared to be standard opening pleasantries. "So, Viola, welcome back to the show. Always great to have you here," the host said. But there was something in his tone that didn't quite match his words. Something that suggested this wasn't going to be the typical softball interview that most A-list actors receive during their promotional tours. "Thank you for having me," Viola responded warmly, clearly expecting the conversation to focus on her work, her craft, and the project she was there to discuss. She had done hundreds of these interviews over her career and knew the rhythm. The expected questions about character preparation, working with directors, and upcoming projects. But the host had other plans. Instead of diving into her latest role or asking about her creative process, he leaned back in his chair with a smirk that should have been the first red flag. "I've been thinking about your career trajectory, and I have to ask, do you ever feel like you've been typecast?" The question itself wasn't necessarily problematic. Actors get asked about typecasting regularly, but it was the way he asked it, the emphasis he placed on certain words, the slight pause before he continued. Let's be honest. You seem to play a lot of the same type of character. The strong, suffering woman, the one who has to overcome incredible odds. Do you think that's because that's all Hollywood sees when they look at you?" Viola's expression shifted slightly, her media-trained smile remaining in place, but her eyes sharpening. She had dealt with ignorant questions before, but she could sense where this was heading. "I think what you're really asking is about the roles available to women who look like me in this industry," she said carefully, maintaining her composure while subtly redirecting the conversation back to a more professional track. But the host wasn't interested in letting her redirect. In fact, he seemed energized by her measured response. "Well, yes, exactly. When was the last time you played someone who wasn't dealing with some kind of trauma or social issue? Don't you want to just play someone normal for once?" The audience began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the light entertainment they had come expecting. Viola took a slow breath, her years of experience in handling difficult situations kicking in. "I think what's important to understand is that every character I choose to portray has depth and complexity beyond whatever struggles they may face. These are human stories, and human stories often involve overcoming challenges. But don't you think," the host pressed on, clearly not satisfied with her diplomatic answer, "that by always playing these types of roles, you're kind of limiting yourself? Look at some of your contemporaries who've branched out into comedy, action, different genres. Aren't you curious about exploring those areas?" Now, the questions were becoming more pointed, more personal, and more inappropriate. Viola's patience was being tested in real time, but she maintained her professionalism. "I've actually done work in various genres throughout my career. Perhaps you're not familiar with the full scope of my filmography." The subtle dig landed, and the host's expression flickered with irritation. He wasn't used to guests pushing back, even politely. Most celebrities would just laugh off his inappropriate questions and move on. But Viola wasn't most celebrities. She was someone who had fought for every opportunity in her career and wasn't about to let anyone diminish her choices or her talent. "Oh, I'm familiar with your work," the host said, his tone becoming slightly more aggressive. "I just think it's interesting that an actress of your caliber seems to be drawn to these heavy, depressing roles. Don't you want to make people laugh sometimes? Don't you want to make people feel good?" This was the moment where the interview truly began to derail. The implication was clear. He was suggesting that her work wasn't uplifting, that her choices were somehow wrong or limited. Viola's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her voice remained steady. "I believe that all of my work serves a purpose. Whether it makes people laugh, cry, think, or feel, that's the power of storytelling. I don't think any story that explores the human condition should be dismissed as depressing. The host leaned forward, sensing he had struck a nerve, and apparently deciding to press his advantage. But surely you must get tired of always being the one who has to carry the weight of these serious messages. Don't you ever just want to have fun with a role? Fun, Viola repeated. And for the first time, there was a slight edge to her voice that the more perceptive audience members caught. You think that portraying complex, multidimensional characters isn't fun? You think that bringing important stories to life isn't fulfilling? The temperature in the studio was starting to rise, and the host seemed to realize he had pushed into dangerous territory. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. I'm just saying, maybe it's time to lighten up a little. Show people you can do more than just the serious stuff. And that was when Viola Davis decided she had heard enough. The shift in Viola's demeanor was palpable. Where moments before she had been diplomatic and measured, now there was steel in her voice. Lighten up, she repeated. And the way she said it made. The host realized he might have just crossed a line he couldn't uncross. You want me to lighten up? Let me ask you something. When was the last time someone told Meal Street to lighten up? When was the last time someone suggested that Daniel D. Lewis should stop being so serious about his craft? The host tried to backtrack, sensing the interview was slipping away from him. Well, I wasn't trying to compare you two. Oh, but you were comparing me. Viola cut him off, her voice rising just enough to command attention. You're sitting here questioning my artistic choices, suggesting that I need to prove myself in ways that my white counterparts never have to. You're asking me why I don't just want to have fun, as if the work I do, the stories I tell somehow don't count as legitimate entertainment. The audience was dead silent now. This wasn't the usual late-night banter they were accustomed to. This was real, raw, and uncomfortable. The host shifted in his chair, clearly regretting his line of questioning, but too proud to simply apologize and move on. I think you're reading too much into what I'm saying, he said, attempting to regain control of the conversation. I was just trying to have a casual conversation about your career choices. Viola let out a laugh, but there was no humor in it. Casual? You call questioning an accomplished actress about why she chooses meaningful roles instead of fluff casual? You call suggesting that I'm somehow limiting myself by telling important stories casual? Sir, there is nothing casual about the disrespect you've shown me in the last 10 minutes. The host's face was beginning to flush. He wasn't used to being called out so directly, especially not on his own show. Look, I think we're getting off track here. I was just trying to. You were trying to what? Viola demanded, leaning forward in her chair. You were trying to put me in a box. You were trying to suggest that the work I've dedicated my life to isn't good enough. That I should aspire to something lighter, something less challenging, something that won't make people think too hard. I never said your work wasn't good enough, the host protested. But his voice lacked conviction. You didn't have to say it explicitly, Viola replied, her tone cutting through his weak defense. It was in every question you asked. It was in the way you framed my choices as limitations rather than deliberate artistic decisions. It was in your suggestion that I need to prove myself by doing comedy or action, as if the dramatic work I do is somehow lesser. The host tried once more to salvage the situation. I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I have great respect for your work. I was just curious about your future projects and whether you might explore different genres. No, Viola said firmly. Don't try to reframe this now. You didn't ask about my future projects. You didn't ask about my interests or my goals. You questioned my past choices and suggested they were somehow inadequate. You asked me if I ever wanted to play someone normal, as if the characters I portray aren't human beings worthy of respect and recognition. The studio audience was riveted. Many of them were pulling out their phones, sensing they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. The host looked around nervously, clearly aware that this was not going according to any script or plan. I think we should maybe take a break, he suggested. But Viola wasn't finished. A break? She asked incredulously. You want to take a break now? After you've spent the better part of this interview questioning my integrity as an artist? After you've suggested that my body of work is somehow insufficient? No, I don't think a break is going to fix this. The host's producer could be seen frantically gesturing from the sidelines, but Viola was in full command now. She had found her voice, and she wasn't about to be silenced. Let me tell you something about the roles I choose, she continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. Every character I portray is a deliberate choice. Every story I tell matters. When I play a woman overcoming trauma, I'm not just acting. I'm giving voice to millions of women who have lived that experience. When I portray struggle and resilience, I'm honoring the strength of people who rarely see themselves represented on screen. The host opened his mouth to respond, but Viola held up her hand. I'm not finished. You asked me if I wanted to play someone normal. Let me ask you this. What exactly do you consider normal? Because the women I portray, the stories I tell, they are normal. They are real. They are the experiences of real people living real lives. And if you can't see the value in that, if you can't understand why those stories deserve to be told with the same respect and recognition as any other genre, then maybe you're not qualified to be conducting this interview. The host's face was now visibly red. He had lost complete control of his own show, and everyone in the studio knew it. I think you're being a little dramatic here, he said. And the moment those words left his mouth, he knew he had made a terrible mistake. Viola's eyes flashed with anger. Dramatic? Did you just call me dramatic for defending my artistic choices? For standing up for the work that has earned me the respect of my peers and the recognition of audiences worldwide? You're going to sit there and dismiss my legitimate concerns as being dramatic. The audience gasped audibly. The host had just committed the cardinal sin of dismissing an accomplished woman's valid criticism as being overly emotional or dramatic. It was a mistake that would define the rest of this interview. That's not what I meant, he stammered. But it was too late. The damage was done, and Viola was done with his excuses. That's exactly what you meant, Viola said, her voice now carrying the full weight of her years in an industry that had tried to diminish her at every turn. You meant that I should sit here quietly and accept your condescending questions without pushback. You meant that I should smile and nod while you question the validity of my career choices. And when I refuse to do that, when I stand up for myself and my work, you call me dramatic. Do you have any idea how insulting that is? The host was scrambling now, sweat visible on his forehead as he realized the interview had become a complete disaster. Viola, please. I think we've had a miscommunication here. Maybe we can start over. Talk about your new project. Start over? Viola's voice was incredulous. You think we can just pretend the last 15 minutes didn't happen? You think I'm going to sit here and promote my work to someone who has spent this entire time disrespecting me and everything I stand for? You have fundamentally misunderstood who you're dealing with. She stood up from her chair, and the action sent a ripple of shock through the studio audience. Guests didn't just stand up in the middle of interviews. They certainly didn't walk away from major network television appearances. But Viola Davis wasn't just any guest. And this wasn't just any interview. Sit down, please, the host said, his voice taking on a pleading quality. We're in the middle of taping. We can work this out. Work this out, Viola repeated, still standing. The only thing that needs to be worked out is your understanding of basic respect and professionalism. You invited me here as a guest, and you have treated me as if I were some struggling actress desperate for validation. You have questioned my artistic integrity, dismissed my concerns, and then had the audacity to call me dramatic when I refused to accept your disrespect. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment of what was becoming television history. The host looked desperately at his producers, but they were frozen, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this play out. I apologize if you feel that I was disrespectful, the host said. But even his apology was weak and conditional. If I feel, Viola's voice rose to a pitch that commanded the attention of everyone in the studio. If I feel disrespected, there's no if about it. You were disrespectful. You questioned my career choices as if they were somehow inadequate. You suggested I needed to prove myself in genres that you deemed worthy. You dismissed legitimate stories about real people as depressing and heavy. And when I called you out on it, you told me I was being dramatic. That's not a feeling. That's a fact. The host made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Look, maybe I asked the wrong questions, but I was just trying to have an interesting conversation. I was trying to dig deeper than the usual promotional stuff. Dig deeper? Viola laughed, but there was no warmth in it. You think what you did was digging deeper? You think reducing my entire career to a series of stereotypes and then questioning why I haven't branched out is deep interviewing? Sir, you wouldn't know deep if it hit you in the face. What you did was lazy, biased, and frankly embarrassing for someone in your position. She began to remove her microphone, her movements deliberate and final. You want to know what digging deeper looks like? It's asking about the research I do for my roles. It's asking about the directors I collaborate with, and what draws me to specific projects. It's asking about the craft of acting and the responsibility I feel to the characters I portray. It's not questioning whether my artistic choices are valid or suggesting that I need to lighten up to be taken seriously. The host watched helplessly as she unclipped the microphone pack from her dress. Viola, please don't do this. We can edit this out. We can start fresh. Edit this out? Viola turned to face him directly, her expression a mixture of disappointment and determination. You think the solution is to pretend this conversation never happened? You think the answer is to hide the fact that you spent 20 minutes disrespecting one of your guests? No, sir. I think people should see exactly what kind of interview you conduct when you think you can get away with it. She placed the microphone on the side table next to her chair with deliberate care. You know what the real tragedy is here? I came on this show excited to talk about a project that means everything to me. I came here ready to share the story behind the story, to talk about the incredible cast and crew I worked with, to discuss the themes and messages that make this film important. Instead, I got to experience what it's like to have my entire career reduced to a caricature by someone who clearly hasn't done his homework. The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the cameras. The audience sat transfixed, witnessing something they had never seen before on late-night television. This is what happens when preparation meets prejudice, Viola continued, her voice steady and strong. This is what happens when someone assumes they know an artist's limitations without understanding their motivations. This is what happens when respect goes out the window in favor of what someone thinks will make good television. She gathered her purse and began to walk toward the exit, but she turned back one final time. I've spent my entire career proving that I belong in this industry. I've fought for every role, every opportunity, every moment of recognition. I'm not about to sit here and let someone who hasn't done a fraction of the work I've done question whether I'm doing it right. The host made one final desperate plea. Viola, please. I have great respect for you. I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Viola said, her hand on the stage exit, is yours. You misunderstood who you were talking to. You misunderstood what constitutes respectful interviewing, and you misunderstood what the consequences would be when you cross the line. I hope your viewers understand the difference between entertainment and disrespect, because what happened here tonight was definitely not entertainment. And with that, Viola Davis walked off the set, leaving behind a stunned host, a speechless audience, and television history. The cameras captured every step as she exited with the same dignity and grace she had entered with, proving that sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is knowing when to walk away. What do you think about Viola's decision to walk away? Was she right to stand up for herself, or should she have handled it differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure you subscribe for more stories that show what really happens when the cameras are rolling.